Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Welcome on today's seminar on understanding the impact of proficiency on critical thinking English education segment Cinta. My name is Deva Nisatul Azahra, and I'll be your moderator for these sessions. We're excited to have you here, and we've prepared an engaging and informative topics that we hope will spark some great discussions and ideas. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First is Kuswanda Gustiani and Gia Andhra Yazid. Today, they will be sharing insight on the impact of reading and thinking skills in English Education Department Untirta. So, which we believe is especially relevant and impactful in today's context. Please join Kuswanda and Gia Andhra Yazid. The time is yours.
Thank you so much, moderator. May I have the next slide, please? All right, here I'll be explaining the background of the paper. So reading proficiency and critical thinking are crucial for academic achievement and intellectual development in higher educations, influencing students' academic success and intellectual development. Understanding the impact of reading proficiency on students' critical thinking in higher educations has caught the interest of educators and researchers. Reading proficiency refers to the capacity to understand, interpret, and analyze text that can vary from simple to complex. Critical thinking, on the other hand, includes reasoning, evaluating, and receiving logical outcomes. These two skills have an interest intense connections. A student's capacity to engage critically with academics is frequently determined by their ability to accurately read and comprehend complex concepts. Academic and educator have continuously focused on the value of critical thinking in higher educations. It is fundamental academic outcome at many colleges is considered as a critical for problem solving, decision making, and knowledge constructions. However, students are frequently struggling with the task requiring them to critical thinking, and then particularly when they are interpreting text, making argument, and evaluating sources of the materials of information. One of the potential explanation for these issues is that students' reading skills are marginal or below average, limiting their capacity to engage critically with their academic materials. In real life situations, many students appear to be perplexed and have difficulties in comprehending materials. Many students also instead absorb information from outside without evaluating and the source of the information, resulting in a misunderstanding and inaccurate information. However, there has been limited students study of the correlations between reading proficiency and critical thinking achievement in higher education. While previous research indicates that relationship between literacy and cognitive development, there is still insufficient evidence in understanding how reading proficiency impacts critical thinking, especially among higher education students. The study aims to fill this knowledge gap by analyzing the impact of reading proficiency level on critical thinking skills among college students. By understanding these correlations, educators and institutions can develop more effective approach to learn reading interventions and curriculum enhancement to support students' intellectual growth. Next slide, please. All right, so the problem statement, although the reading proficiency and critical thinking abilities are considered to be crucial in education, research into how these skills connect in higher education is limited. Many students are still having trouble with critical thinking or completing activities that require high skills of critical thinking, which may be due to challenges with reading comprehensions and text analysis, which may be caused by improper reading habits. However, the way in which reading proficiency supports the development of critical thinking needs to be studied more. With an in-depth understanding of these connections, educators may be unable to effectively address critical thinking problems in their curriculum. This study aims to address this gap by studying how reading proficiency impacts critical thinking in students in higher education. Next slide, please. All right, so the research questions. How might reading proficiency impact higher education students' critical thinking skills? And then second one, what challenges do students have in developing reading proficiency and critical thinking skills? And then the third one, what kinds of strategies that may students implement to increase the critical thinking to improving reading proficiency abilities? And then the research objective, there are three of them, which is analyze the significance of reading proficiency and critical thinking skills in university students. And then the second one is to identify the most prevalent challenges that students encounter in the both areas. And then the last one is propose educational strategies for enhancing critical thinking to increase the reading proficiency. Next slide, please. All right, so the significance of the study. The significance of the study is the means to explore the impact of the students' reading proficiency to their critical thinking and skills in the higher education settings. Through observing the personal experience from the perspective of the students, the study aiming to provide a subtle, detailed significance of the role of reading proficiency in reading skills. And then the outcome of the study is likely to bring information beneficial for the language learning proficiency, strategic development in that highlight the importance of reading proficiency as a means of developing linguistic growth. And furthermore, this study may also provide a deeper and further understanding of the complex correlations between the reading proficiency students and their critical thinking skill. As for the research gap, Well, as for the research gap, the following research gap that will be addressed in this study is that there is a differences in how the two variables interact at the university level, because the majority of the studies concentrate on the elementary or secondary education level. Most studies focus on the general literacy and thinking skill, but do not specifically examine how different levels of reading proficiency impact critical thinking in the university students. And then the second one, not much is known about how certain people's strategies can hinge on reading and critical thinking abilities at the same time. And then for the third one is that, next slide please. There is limited qualitative studies on students' actual challenges and experiences, explore these skills. This study will discover specific challenges that students face as they develop these abilities. And then the last one, research is largely quantitative, example in test score, lacking qualitative insight into how students experience and process reading to develop their critical thinking skills. Next slide, please. All right, for the literature review, for this part, reading proficiency, reading is a complex process that includes word recognition, comprehensions, fluency, and motivation, stated by Gustian. Reading is a brain-centered cognitive process that involves the same mental process that brain does for the other purpose, like paying attention to something, forgetting an important call. Since reading is a tool subject, teachers must give students all developmental reading instructions that students need. According to Mensa, low reading proficiency among students is a barrier to successful learning. As a result, has a negative effect on their academic performance. Students' academic success in higher education is significantly influenced by their level of reading comprehension, particularly when reading academic papers written in English. In other words, for students to achieve reading achievement, proficient reading is crucial. One of the reasons is that for the reading encourages the development of cognitive abilities that are needed of learning. According to Scott and Simon, as cited in Mensa, proficient reading allows one to make a sense of the materials that is being read and understand as the object of the text, leading to facilitating understanding. As a result, students with low reading proficiency, in example, in text interpretations, understanding, and evaluations, may struggle with keeping up with their educational responsibility. Students in higher educations are expected to read an immense amount of discipline-related articles that on their own and successfully assess the materials for academic work and so et al. To accomplish this, they must read the interpretations, comprehensions, and evaluations among the other skills. Furthermore, Becky stated in Mensa also believes that with an appropriate level of reading proficiency, students are not considered to have the essential academic literacy ability to function at the higher education level. Considering the importance of reading proficiency and understanding education, it is clear that effective learning will not happen without any efficient reading comprehensions. Next slide, please. All right, so the critical thinking. Critical thinking are more crucial now than ever because we are constantly exposed to an increasing amount of information and misinformation on the social media, and then radio, newspaper, podcast, televisions, newspaper program, and the internet. It is crucial to be able to differentiate between what is partisan and what is valid, and as well as in what information means to oneself and society, as stated by Sapiri. In education, critical thinking skill cannot be separated from language learners. Critical thinkings are not developed by simply or automatically to have the desired effect. The skills must be carried in order to improve the engagement of the students. And then critical thinking skills should be taught in the classroom through the questions and reasoning. Students must be taught how to examine the information they receive. And they also should be able to justify their opinions and actions. As stated by Hidayati, argue that education should now be prioritize the development of the students' critical thinking skill. Curriculum and implementations for critical thinking skill must be designed, and students and graduates with critical thinking skills will achieve higher degrees of success in their studies and careers. Students with critical thinking abilities will be able and will be better to become more self-sufficient leaders and professional. And moving on to the cognitive skills part. Cognitive skills are the functions of the brain that helps you to process information, pay attention, and then process information and remember things. Bloom's taxonomy is an approach for categorizing learning objectives into 6 categories of cognitive skills. Bloom's taxonomy is an essential component for every teaching and learning activity. It categorizes levels for cognitive development that are expected to be achieved during various learning paths. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical system that categorizes learning stages that range from remembering facts to creating new ideas. Banda explains Bloom's taxonomy skills to higher order cognitive as usefulness and classifying students' ability. So the Cognitive process of dimensions categories are meant to provide a two set of classifications for the student's cognitive process, included in the objective and then remember implies recalling important information and then from the long-term memory, understanding the defined as the forming the meaning of the instructions through the oral, written, and then graphic communications. Apply means to carry out are the use of the method in the specific situations. Analyze means breaking down the materials into its component parts and identifying how they connect one to another, as well as to a larger structure of purposes. Evaluate means to make decisions based on criteria or in a standard. Finally, create means combining pieces to build a novel, coherent, a whole, or to create an original product. And then move on. Next slide, please. Okay, as for the research design, this study utilizes a qualitative phenomenological approach, which is to explore the impact of reading ability on critical thinking skills through the higher education students' perspective and beliefs. This method is used in the study to distribute questionnaires to chosen samples and a deeper interview that will be conducted after analyzing the questionnaires' responses, accompanied by observations of discerning environment and analyzing their critical thinking skills in daily activities. And then as for the sample and procedures, the study involves university students as a sample, with 10 participants selected using the purposive sample method for ensuring a diverse range of reading proficiency levels. Participants will be elected or selected from two different to provide a varied range of reading proficiency abilities and critical levels. Demographic factors such as gender, age, field of study, and academic standing will be taken into consideration to answer a comprehensive analysis. The first procedure to assess participants using questionnaire is to answer questions about the research instrument and then to proceed an interview to learn about what they have provided and an observation in order to determine the environment malpractice skills. Furthermore, the data that has been obtained will be analyzed to be concluded into the results. I'll be giving the next part to Gia, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next is data analysis. This study will be employing George's descriptive phenomenological analysis in order to find out the students' experience of the correlations between their reading proficiency and their critical thinking skills. The analysis will be following George's structured process, which is firstly reading for a sense of the whole, secondly identifying the meanings units, thirdly transforming units into physiological expressions, and lastly synthesizing a general structure of experience. The step is like reading the transcript for a sense of the whole, identifying meaning units from response, and synthesizing a general structures of experience. For the limitations, there are some limitations such as sample size. This limited to students from only 2 academic years, and next is bias in reported data, possible influence from sociability or misinterpretations during interviews or observations, and the next measurement limitations. Tools used may not fully capture the depth of reading and thinking skills, and the last one is contextual factors. Reading style, cultural background, and prior education may affect outcomes but are not deeply explored. The next one is research finding. The study involves students' understanding and experience with the impact of reading proficiency on critical thinking skill. We use a questionnaire containing 8 questions to get understanding from participants, and this is the research finding. The first is variability in reading proficiency. The students' reading skill found range pretty widely. Some often show a skills, claiming they are of comprehensions pretty quickly, as well as providing an effective summary of the text they read. Others also declared that they happen to struggle and have trouble when it comes to complex vocabulary, lengthy phrases, and academic language. Some they thought of themselves as having pretty average skills, which can be inferred that comprehend depending on the reading's context, something they found challenging. The next is reading ability as an aspect of critical thinking. Many students stated that they acknowledged that their capability to think critically was highly subordinated to how well they understood the text they read. Students who happened to have a better reading ability stated that they were capable of providing arguments in the text, developing deeper questions to be asked, and making meaningful correlations. Those who happen to have poor reading ability often find it difficult to process or form an opinion and understanding reading context. And personal growth through readings. Students share their personal experience in which which reading academic textures all manage to help them rethink previous beliefs or sparks new insight. The topics that are included are culture, gender, education, and language. Most happen to be read something transformative with it is occurring to be interesting and relevant. And the next is challenges with academic facts. Common challenges include unfamiliar vocabulary, long or complex sentence structure, difficulty in identifying the main ideas, and fatigue from exercise or reading activity. Participants oftentimes feel the necessity to read or use external tools to make sense of text. And the last one is most students to define students' understanding of critical thinking. Most students to define critical thinking as questioning, analyzing, or synthesizing information. Given the definition that were varied in complexity, their general understanding that are critical thinking actually involve more than surface level comprehension. And the next one is discussion. The result found strongly support the theoretical connection between proficiency and the development of critical thinking skill. The first one is different happens to aligning with Gustian et al. And Mensa et al., who argued that reading is not merely and exclusively a linguistic activity, but rather a complex cognitive process, which is fairly essential for student academic success. And students who have the capability or skill to read fluently and comprehend the meaning of the text, read more deeply, are usually have a better chance to engage with academic context. And the next is Bloom taxonomy and cognitive progression. The development of critical thinking, which are observed among participants, is found to align with the framework of Bloom taxonomy, and these findings suggest that reading proficiency are facilitating movement through the cognitive hierarchy from the extent of understanding to evaluations and creations. And the next is the need for explicit instruction. Hidayat emphasized that it is a necessity and must for critical thinking to be taught and practiced. Educators must solely rely in the action of encouraging students to reading, but also providing them tools that promote analyzing, questioning, and reflection. Next is reading as Pierre, that critical thinking does have information overload. And the last one is academic literacy and student development. Bokeh and Scott and Simon gave and emphasized that students without a certain level of academic reading skill are certainly not likely to make their mark in higher educations. And I think that's all for our conclusions. We found that students with strong reading and making thoughtful decisions. However, may still face challenges like limited vocabulary and poor comprehensions, which make it harder to engage with academic texts. Despite this struggle, students agree that reading plays an important role in their learning and growth. Therefore, improving reading proficiency will be a key focus on higher education, with teaching strategy that connect reading and critical thinking to help students become more independent and analytical thinkers. Thank you. Back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you for that insightful presentation. So now we'll move on to the Q&A segment. If anyone has questions, please feel free to raise your hands.
May I?
Yes.
All right, so
Of
my
course.
question is, how do you think does the result of this study reflect the current condition of reading proficiency in Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you, Nathan. So now we're gonna wait the speakers to answer the questions.
May I answer your questions, Nathan?
Of course.
All right, so the study's results probably show up bigger problems with reading skills in Indonesians. As we found, many participants report that the students often find it hard to understand what they read and think critically, especially with top academic texts in English with the complex words. Things like not reading much unequal access to good school and then focusing too much on memorizing instead of analyzing, causing these issues. And then our study findings suggest that students struggling with new words, understanding text, and not having good reading habits match these national worries about reading skills. It shows that reading abilities in Indonesians needs a lot of work, especially in university level, where critical thinking is super important and necessary for them. This highlights why schools should teach more better reading and critical thinking together in order to help the students to gain a more meaningful and better academic life. Is that answering your questions, Nathan?
Yes, thank you so much, Kuswanda, Cinta, Gustiani.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's bring us to the end of today's seminar. Thank you once again, our speaker, Wanda and Gia, for the valuable insight, and to all of you for attention and engagement. That's all from us. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a great day.